Welcome to this one of two bonus sessions to the Complete Guide to Design training course. This session right now is going to be looking at how to design great header graphics, and we're going to be using the powerful X-Header software to help us do just that. But before we get started, let's take a look at the agenda, what we're going to be covering off in the session right now. First of all, we're going to cover off some essential tips, 3 things to use or think about before you actually get started designing your header. We're then going to look at actually how you go about choosing a template using the X-Header software. We'll talk about if you can't find a template that you like in X-Header, how you can design your own header background as your own starting point, very briefly in that third section. We'll cover off logos and text, how you use them to good effect in your header design. And we'll look at adding graphics to help bring our header graphics alive. And finally, we'll save and optimize our header graphic ready for bringing into our website design application of choice. So without further ado, let's get started with some stuff to consider before you actually get going designing your header graphic. Now, we've covered a lot of this information that we're going to cover off now, of course, in the design course, the main part of the training product itself. So I'm not going to repeat all of those lessons right now, but you will see us using some of the tools and systems that we've been discussing before. The first thing I'm going to suggest is obviously something that has come from the design course also, and that is that we need to do some simple research before we get going designing a header graphic. It only takes a few minutes, and yet it can save you a great deal of time and hassle by looking at what's out there, what our competitors have done in terms of header design, and see if we can get some good ideas. Better still, if you've taken the time to set up an Evernote account or a similar file that you can save your swipe content to, remember we discussed that in the design course, then that's definitely a good idea, because you're going to perhaps already have a series of header graphic designs that you've come across in your travels online that you liked the look of and that you thought, hey, well, I better save that to my swipe file so that I can refer to it later on because it's a good example of good header graphic design. If not, don't worry, we're going to be covering off how we can do some simple searches right now, starting with the most obvious, of course, the simple, good old-fashioned Google search for our niche, our keywords that are relevant to our website. Let's say, for example, that lawn care was our niche. That's the niche that we're in. We can do a simple search and then literally just pop open a few of the search results in some tabs and take a look at the header designs and see what we think. Well, this one, for example, yardcare.com, good things and bad things, kind of like the curves on it because it sort of makes the website look a little bit more contemporary, a bit more modern. However, I don't really personally like this script font because they're harder to read and it can look a little bit cheesy and gimmicky. But nevertheless, you know, interesting. It's a good use of colors. They've got a nice sort of gradient fade to black. They've got obvious use of greens, which makes sense given the topic of the website, lawn care. So they've obviously thought about the colors that they're using, and you can see that color has been picked up in things like these heading text, the menu text, and so on. So, you know, smart use of color throughout the design there. So that's one. This next one, lawncare.net, very different, very plain, simple white background, and they've used, again, green colors, a nice little cute logo there that just gives a touch of design to the logo. It's a bit more than just text, as you can see, and they've picked up on the green used in that logo design for the subhead there, the strap line. Now, the strap line's a useful thing to note because it's obviously a statement of values or lays out what that site is about in a single line, and that's useful because obviously this header graphic, this section of the site is going to appear on every page, so it's a constant reminder what it is that this site is about. And just hopping on to our last quick example here, another obvious one, you know, green colors again. This time they've used a sort of an enlarged grass image in the background with the website name overlaid. And again, you know, importantly, note that every single one of these sites has used the website name as the prominent text in the header graphic. This one has also gone to the extent of adding a special offer, but that's really supplemental to the header design, so we won't really focus on that. So that's at the very simplest level what you can do to get some header ideas. Obviously, I would want to spend a great deal more time than that, probably half an hour or so, looking at different ideas and the ones that I thought really spoke to me in terms of design for that particular niche, for my niche, were it lawn care. I'd be wanting to save those off to my Evernote account so that I can refer back to them later on. Okay, let's move on. Another tip for you is about colors. Now, we talked about Cooler. This is a tool from Adobe. And Cooler lets us look at what are great color themes that we could use for our website. And I'm going to suggest that you use this tool as a useful starting point when you're trying to come up with ideas for your color scheme for your site. And of course, that includes your header graphic, because when you're looking later on in Xheader or wherever you're looking for a quality header graphic, it's going to be useful if we have in the back of our mind the sort of color theme that we want to go with. Remember, we talked about color psychology in the design course? Well, the color theme, the colors that you choose in your prominent header graphic can help set the overall tone of the website for you. And as we saw with those lawn care headers, they all predominantly picked up on the green color scheme. They identified that that was obviously an integral color that people were expecting to see on a site about lawn care, and they've leveraged that. So here on Cooler, we can actually do searches for keywords. We didn't actually do this in the design course. We looked at searching for related colors. But what we can do in the search box in the left-hand side here is simply enter a particular theme. Let's try business, for example. If I could spell it right, that would be good. And you'll see that Cooler does a search in its archive of all of the different color themes that artists and designers have suggested that are related to business. And you'll see at the bottom there are 924 themes that have been suggested that we could browse through. But I'm not going to browse through them all, but I can sort of click on a couple and show you that, sure enough, if you look at the color theme there, that absolutely screams business, corporate colors. Likewise, the reds and greys and darker colors, these are corporate colors. And I'm sure when you look at that, you immediately would agree that, these are definitely sort of commercial colors. And you could scroll through a selection of the different palettes that people have submitted and see if, again, any of them really scream the keyword that you searched for at you. Let's try another one, technology. See what we get for technology. Okay, interesting. Some sort of fresh colours. You can see some blues and greys. I think this one particularly, for me anyway, says technology. You've got vibrant blues, you've got dark blues and greys and whites contrasting. It is a common theme that you see, blues and greys in technology. So that's interesting. We could equally search for terms like romance, and you'd be sure to see reds and pinks. We could search for summer, and I'm sure you'd see oranges and yellows and reds. You get the point here. We can pop in search terms that are relevant to our business, to our niche, whatever it is that we're building our site around, and see what color themes come back. So it's a useful tool. So those two things so far, we searched for our keywords relating to our website, our niche, and saw examples of what other people competing with us have done with their header graphics, just for design inspiration. And we've come to Cooler now to get some ideas as far as the color scheme is concerned. And there's one other thing I'm going to suggest you do, and that's to call up Big Stock Photo. We looked at Big Stock Photo, which is a stock image library, and when we were looking at the tools in the design course. And what we can do here is perform a search. Let's search for technology again. And we can get two things from this search by searching for our keywords. We can get ideas as to color themes. And you can see quite clearly here, there is a predominant color theme running throughout these images that is blues. So it's kind of reinforcing the idea that blues, maybe greys, are a prominent design expectation, or rather they are a popular color choice when it comes to technology. And we can also, obviously, because we're looking at images, get some ideas as to the actual imagery that we could contemplate employing in our header graphic and also throughout our site. So there's some interesting tips there for you, 3 ideas that you can employ before you even start designing your header graphic that are going to get you some way there. You'll have some ideas as to what works from your inspiration, from your research. You'll have a clear idea on what the colors are that you want to use, and you'll, having searched Big Stock Photo, get a reinforcement of those color ideas perhaps, and some ideas as to specific imagery that you could use. Now, for the purposes of the demonstration today, I'm going to design a header for you, a very simple, nice, clean header graphic for a product made by Intellimon called Xsite Pro, the website design software. And that software is designed to make website design simple. It's a technology product, of course, so I'm going to pick up on that particular theme and go with what's being suggested to me by these searches I'm doing of sorts of blues and greys, those sorts of colors, because I feel that they're really relevant to the product. Now, those of you who perhaps know the brand will already know that we do pick up on blues predominantly in our products because they are technology products at the end of the day. So that's our starting point. We've done a little bit of research and thinking. I've done that very quickly, obviously in 10 minutes or so. But you would obviously want to spend a little bit more time making notes of things that work for you, adding them to your swipe file and so on. And then when you're happy that you kind of got the groundwork done, we can actually get started creating our header graphic. So that's before we get started. The next step is to choose our template. Now, if we hop over to Xheader Pro, we'll see in Xheader that we can create a new header graphic by clicking the new button. And we can do a number of things at this point. We can load from the template library. These templates, by the way, they're like header backgrounds that we can then customize. They're our starting point for our header graphic. We could create a blank header graphic. I'm not going to do that today because, why start from scratch when we've got some wonderful templates that can give us a head start. We could load an existing Xheader file, which we don't have, or we could load an image from our hard disk if we couldn't find a suitable header graphic within the Xheader catalog. Now, that's very unlikely because, as you'll know, if you've got Xheader, there are 5,000 template backgrounds, header backgrounds that we can choose from. But if you couldn't find one that was exactly what you wanted, then of course you do have the option of bringing your own background into Xheader for you then to manipulate. So I clicked the new from template library option there, and from the categories on the left hand side here, I could simply browse and select a relevant header graphic. Okay, a couple of points to make at this stage. Firstly, obviously you want to be choosing categories as a starting point that are relevant to your niche, to your site's offering. There's no point, for example, in me choosing the category children and babies there just above this one when my site's about website design software. Okay, so pick a category that's relevant to start with. That's a kind of an obvious statement. And the second point I wanted to make was, in my view, my advice to you is to keep it simple. A lot of designs that you see are overly complicated, they're too noisy. Remember one of the lessons that we taught in the design course, and that is that your design overall, and including your header graphic of course, is there to support your content. It's to frame your content. The content is the important part of the website. Don't drown out that content by having overly complicated or visually arresting header graphics. You want them to be almost understated, professional looking, communicating your brand, perhaps some brand values, but don't go crazy and have it, sort of a really garish, in your face graphic, because it is going to, if anything, detract from the content, which is the core proposition of your site. So a couple of tips for you there. Now, all we would need to do is simply browse through the selection of headers. That's quite a nice one there with the computer and the blue color there. And then simply keep scrolling until we find one that we like the look of. I'm not going to choose one from this particular category. There are lots more, obviously, in the second section of the same category. They're in separate sections. They're split across multiple sections to make it faster for the images to load for you. So I could scroll through those. Again, nothing leaping out at me at that stage, particular to what I'm wanting to achieve. I'm going to give you another tip here. And that is to, no matter what your category, check out the design and graphics headers that are in Xheader. The reason being that they are, as you can see, pretty clean blank canvases that you could take in any direction. So, based on the color theme, for example, you could take them into a technology niche. You could pick a darker color, perhaps go for something more corporate. You could go for the brighter colors and, go for something that's more fun, subtler colors, maybe for health and well-being, things like that. You can take all of these different designs here, these design and graphics category headers, in a number of directions, and they all also particularly these ones with the rounded corners. They look very nice on Web 2.0 with the shiny effects and the swirls and so on. So they're a really good starting point. They're nice and clean in terms of the design, and they're going to lend themselves beautifully to us adding elements like text and perhaps some images, because they haven't got too much else competing in that same header design. So I could just scroll through a whole bunch of these. I'm going to pick one from this third category here, Design and Graphics 3. Now, you'll remember that I've chosen the theme that's sort of technology related, so blues and greys. I'm going to scroll through these until I find one that I like the look of, and the one I'm going to choose is this sort of darker blue one here. The reason being is I think that it was one of the darker blues that appeared in the technology color schemes as suggested by Cooler, but also because I think that it's going to contrast well with some lighter text. Okay, so it's really going to set my page up nicely. It's quite understated, the design. There's just some subtle effects to it, the circles and so on, and a gradient. I think it's quite a classy starting point for my design. So having found the design I want to use, I'm just going to double click it to call it into the Xheader software here. And at this point, we can start to customize the design. Now, I'm going to actually do a quick breakout at this point, having chosen my background design and having brought it into Xheader, because I did note before we started searching for headers within the category screen that we could, if we couldn't find a design that we liked, we could actually create our own background, just like the one that you see on your screens right now, by simply getting an image from a stock library site like Big Stock Photo, cropping it and bringing that in using the start from image off hard disk button that we saw at the start of the Xheader demo there. So what I'm going to do very quickly in this little 2-minute breakout is just show you how easy it is to go find an image, doing a simple search, and then to crop that image so that we could bring it in just as we've done effectively with this background right now. So I'm just going to head back to Big Stock Photo, and if I wanted to, literally I could just have a look through these technology related images and just have an eye for which might make for a good header graphic. You can see there are even some images there that look almost header graphic size. So scrolling through, I would just literally find a graphic that I kind of like the look of and think I could crop a nice section from, and just pop that image open in a new tab. And then I could go and take a look at that downloaded if I wanted to. And I've done a few here that you can see, that images that kind of look like I could perhaps make a nice neat header graphic from them. Let's see, what else have we got? There's another one here, nice and simple. All sorts of different designs. Okay, so you just want to choose a design that you find works for you, and you can see here is one that I kind of like. It's got even a section that I could almost drop a menu into. Let's just make that a bit bigger. There we are. That section there, you can see we could almost drop a menu in if we actually turned this graphic into our info bar in Xsite Pro. So having chosen your background, you'd simply download that and drop it into your graphics application of choice. And here we can see I'm using Photoshop, but of course, again, as per the design course, you don't need to use Photoshop. You could use GIMP or any other design tool. I've dropped that image into Photoshop, and all I would need to do is simply select the area of the design that I wanted to use, crop that so that it's the right size, and then simply save that to my disk and call it into Xheader using that select image from hard disk button that we saw in Xheader at the start. So that's very simply how to create your own background just by browsing for an image, downloading that image, and then cropping it to a header size and then bringing that into Xheader. So it's really simple. So that was effectively designing your own template, your own background, very briefly. It was only a short breakout. We'll now drop back in a second to Xheader to continue with the background we actually chose. And in so doing, we're going to be talking about logos and text. So here we are back in Xheader, and we're going to be talking about logos and text in just a moment. But before I do, I'm just going to make sure that you're familiar with what these buttons all do so that we're not confusing you. We have a selection tool here for selecting any elements that we add. We have a text tool for adding text elements. We have a line tool for drawing simple lines, some box and circle tools for adding simple line boxes or circles or filled boxes and circles to our design, simple shapes. We can add images from our hard drive using the image button, and we can adjust the order of the layers on that design, whether they're front or back, using the 2 buttons on the right hand side. And we get a whole bunch of settings underneath as well, which change based on which of the options you're currently using. So simple tool really. It's not overly complicated, there's not too much to learn, and there is a manual built into the Xheader software if you get stuck on any of those. But I'm going to talk, as I said a moment ago on the slide, about logos versus text, or logos and text, because you've got a couple of options. You could drop your company logo into this space here or on the right hand side if you wanted to, if you have a logo designed. You could also, if you don't have a logo designed, drop text into that section there. As we kind of saw with the lawncare.net, there really wasn't much in the way of design going on. A small grass logo on the left hand side perhaps, but most of it was definitely text. So we're going to first of all start out as though we didn't have a logo designed, and I'll talk about where you can get a logo designed again in just a few minutes time. But for now, let's go from scratch as though we don't have a logo designed. We just want to come up with something that looks nice here and that communicates our brand, our website brand. Remember, all of the examples we looked at earlier on in the before you start section of this this bonus module, they all had the name of the website in, and I'm going to suggest that you either have the name of the website or at least the name of the product in your header graphic. I'm also going to suggest that you have that subhead that we saw, that strap line. The reason being is it's an opportunity in your header graphic to state your core values. You know, what is your product about? What's your website about? In one line, as succinct as you can get it. Why? Because that header graphic is going to feature on every web page, and it's a good chance to sort of reinforce what it is that your site's about. Every time somebody arrives at your site, they're always going to see that header graphic and that statement. So the product, as I said, that this site's going to be about is X Site Pro. So I'm going to start just by adding some simple text here, and I'm going to type the product name, X Site Pro. I'm going to make the text white in color so that you can see it a bit clearer. There we go. And I'm just going to increase the size of that font and make it bold. Okay, so I've not done a great deal at that point. I've just typed some white text. Now, of course, I could change the font to anything I want. There are all sorts of fonts that we could choose from, of course. Remember what we said about using sans serif fonts? They do display well on screen, and you tend to get better block fonts, you know, bolder, impacting fonts in the sans serif category. And ultimately, it's your decision, but the recommendation is that being a lot clearer and bolder, the sans serif fonts tend to work better for titles for websites within your header graphic. And so I've added that text. I'm also going to add some text below that is my strapline. And for the strapline, I'm going to use professional websites made easy, because that's what X Site Pro is about. As you can see, it's a little bit big, so I'm going to reduce that down to, say, 10 point, perhaps even 9 point. Yeah, that looks fine. And I'm going to choose a contrasting color, something that sort of sits well against that background. Let's just go with this steel blue color for now. That's fine. So I can move that text now and align it. On which subject? Alignment. Really important point here. Now, when people look at a design, they instinctively, perhaps not even consciously, but instinctively and subconsciously, they register how well laid out content is, the design is. So for example, just to sort of illustrate this badly, if I put my text sort of like that, you can immediately see that it doesn't look good. You might not know why it doesn't look good, but it just doesn't look good. And you see loads of websites with design like this that is just slapdash. People have thrown things together and not given a care. At the very simplest level, you should be aligning elements so they sit well together. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to do this by eye, but you'll get the point. I'm going to try and center this text beneath the X Site Pro software. So I'm having a care for the relationship between these two design elements. Okay, so if I center it, that's about centered by eye. I'm also going to have a care for the distance between the bottom of this text and the outer edge of the header graphic, and the top of this text and the outer edge of the header graphic, because I want this to sit centrally, vertically within the design. So it's probably going to need to go down a few pixels, okay? So I'm just doing small changes here, but they're important. Likewise, I might want to try and make it so that the gap here is the same as the gap to the left of the logo, just to sort of give equal spacing to the surround around that design element. Okay, I could equally have wanted to center this this logo element within this sort of left-hand portion of the design to the left of these circles. So you can see there are a range of different things that I can do. Simple things, but quite clearly this text now sits better within the space than it did a moment ago when I just threw it on there. Okay, so it's really important when you're doing your design to make sure that you have a care for layout and spacing. Okay, I'm just going to add another little detail here, because this is the brand name, but it's not the website name. I'm going to add a circle with .com in it, just to make it look like more of a logo than text alone. So I'm going to add a simple circle. Now I'm going to add that circle over on the right hand side. I'm going to make it about the same size as the text elements, top to bottom. And having sort of done that, I'm going to use my right arrow on my keyboard just to move it across without losing the position, the alignment. Remember, we just said alignment's important. Takes a minute, but it'll be worth it. So just scrolling across to the side. That'll probably do. And then I'm just going to drop some text in there that says .com. And move that up. We'll want to bring that to the front, and let's just change the color of it to a sort of a dark blue color. How about something like that? That kind of works. Maybe make it a little bit larger and center that text there. Center the text in the circle. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too long on that design, but you can see how very simply there I've taken a blank header graphic that I kind of thought conveyed the right theme. It's a sort of a professional color, it's technology. I've overlaid some simple text now and a strap line along with an artistic element. You might call it a circle with the .com part in it. We've got the brand, we've got the website in there, we've got the strap line. And I've essentially now at that point got a header graphic that I could use in my website. So you can see how very quickly I've taken it to that level, to the point where I can just export that now to a JPEG or to a PNG file, and I could use it in my website. Okay, so that's using text. Okay, you can see that clearly with just a couple of minutes and a little bit of care and attention to the layout and the colors and so on, you can create something that looks super. I'm going to just get rid of that though now, and talk about using a logo and also using images to help bring your design alive. Now, many of you watching this right now won't have a logo already. You won't have a logo design. So you'll be probably wanting to do what I just did there and come up with something simple text-based that looks nice. But if you do want to get a logo designed, remember, as we showed you in the design course, there are plenty of sites that you can go to, Logo Works, 99 Designs, and so on, places that you can get designs done for you fairly inexpensively. Some are more expensive than others. eCoverbox was another one. You might want to go check those sites out. If you need to refer back to the design course itself to see the sites specifically that we were referring to, do. But you can inexpensively get a logo design. And if you do, it really helps because it adds a professionalism to your header graphic, to everything that you do, in fact, and it makes your brand more recognizable wherever people come across it, be it on your website, in forums, in email signatures and things like that. So I'm just going to bring an image in, which is my logo. But before I do that, I'm going to show you something in my image editor, just to explain how you need to format your images so that they work well on header backgrounds like this. So I'm back in my design application. Remember, whatever application you choose to use is fine. And I'm just calling up an X-Site Pro logo here, okay, that I've got on my system. Now, I need to point something out that's rather important. The thing I need to point out is that on this design, we have two layers. You have a layer which I've called X, which is just the sort of the actual logo itself. And you have a background, and the background is independent of that layer. So if I change the color of that background, can you see I'm just inverting it to black? You can see that the logo is unaffected. It stays sort of floating on the top. Okay, it's independent. There are two independent layers. They're called layers in design terms. Now, the thing that I need to ensure when I'm saving an image that I've created for use against a header background, like the one that we've got waiting for us in Xheader right now, is that you can't have a background color. Because if I have a background color, this image is going to appear in that design with a white background, just like you see on the screen. Conversely, if I had a black background, it would appear just like that with a black box around it. I don't want that. I want the logo on its own to float nicely over that background design. So to achieve that, I actually have to do two things. I have to make sure, as I said, that they are independent layers. And your logo designer will be able to do that, or you could do it yourself by cutting out the logo if it's a graphic, or by overlaying text as a new layer over the background. And once you've got that second layer, the second thing you need to do is to delete the actual background layer. So I can delete that layer, and you'll see here that because of these sort of squares, that actually denotes no layer there. That's transparent effectively. So you can see I've got now a logo that's now floating over a transparent background. And if I save that logo for the web using my design application, it'll be a similar process in your own application, and make it a PNG file, okay, a PNG file with transparency. When I save that file, I'll replace the one that's already there. It's going to save it with a transparent background. So I saved that as logo.png. And if I drop back now into Xheader and then use the image import tool on the menu there and select logo, here's my logo. And as you can see, if I move it around the design, there is no background. It's transparent. So it's floating beautifully over my design. Now, importantly, can you see immediately how using that professional logo has given my header design an added edge, an added air of professionalism? Simply because I've had a logo designed a long time ago, and I can now bring that into Xheader, reuse that logo to make my header look fantastic and professional. And in the same way, it's not just logos that you can have that transparent floating effect on. We can also, if we go to our design application again, use the same effect on images. So here we have a 3D pack shot. Now, 3D pack shots are fairly easy to do. In fact, if you go to a site called blackbeltcovers.com, you'll see there are tools there that you can download for using in design applications that let you do these pretty easily. Or alternatively, for probably 50 or so bucks, you can get a 3D pack shot designed for you by any number of designers out there. So again, all I've done is made sure that I have my my design, my image here, independent of the background, and I've got rid of the background. And in the same way, we can then bring that in to Xheader as a floating design element. Can you see? And now I just want to make a point about images here. It is an item, I know, on our agenda, adding graphics. We've added 2 graphics there in Xheader. I just want to make a point about graphics, and that is that they can do a number of things. They can immediately set the tone for the website. So depending on what sort of graphic you've got, if it's a smiling happy face, for example, if it's a stern businessman, if it's a smiling child's face, these are all things that convey a message very powerfully. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words, and it's true. A couple gazing lovingly into each other's eyes on a dating site. These sorts of images instantly communicate what your site's about. And so here I've chosen a product image to show the product. That is Xsite Pro. It's a piece of software that you can install. And so immediately it's reinforcing the idea of what this website's about. It also ties in with the colors nicely, which is part of the reason I chose this header as well. So you can see here now my header graphic is nice and simple, it's subtle, it's understated, it's using the right colors by design that communicate sort of technology, that sort of element. I've got my logo floating nicely, I've got an image that helps illustrate what my site's about, convey the proposition of my site. All done very quickly in just a few minutes. Okay, so how do we now save this so that we can use it in a website? Simple. All we need to do is go to the Save As icon there in the toolbar. Click that. And we have an option. We can save it as a JPEG or we can save it as a PNG. Now, simple way to know which to use. If it's got rounded corners, you need to save it as a PNG. That's so that the rounded corners have a transparent effect behind them. You don't get any color. showing through. So clicking that asks me, where would you like to save it? I'm going to save it as my header graphic there. And that's it. I've saved that image. If I wanted to save it as a JPEG, I would have more options as far as compressing that image. That is, reducing the file size is concerned. But because I need to save it as a PNG to get the corner effects, I have to. I don't get the compression options. You can't compress a PNG file in the same way as you can a JPEG. So having saved that, the only remaining step, having got a lovely looking header design there, would be, of course, to bring it into my website design application. And in the true traditions of all demonstrations, here's one I prepared earlier. Here we have that header graphic now in Excite Pro in this case, but you could bring it into your own design application. I've chosen a nice grey background. I've got a nice white main panel. Remember those colours that we saw at Cooler? You know, that lovely dark blue, lighter blues, greys, whites. It's communicating technology. I've got that great header design. It's nice and simple. It's not overdone. It's nice and understated. It's got my branding clearly in it. And I've got the white space now in which I can put the most important part of my web page, of course, and that's the content. So in a little over 30 minutes, we've taken a look from scratch at a whole range of ways that we can prime ourselves for creating great header graphics, how we can actually choose great header graphic backgrounds, create our own if we can't find one that's appropriate, and then customize that using either plain text and simple design elements or using images and specifically logos to really bring our header graphic alive. So hopefully you found this bonus session really useful. We've covered off saving and optimizing. That's the end of this bonus session right now. Do look out for the second bonus session, which is about designing custom templates in Excite Pro. So all that remains for me to say is thank you for watching.